No, you good. First and foremost, I want to thank Bishop Dixon and Freddie Haynes from the Houston chapter of the NAACP and Dr. Haynes from Friendship West Church in Dallas for allowing me to be a part of this rally and this press conference today, in which we're addressing HB 6 and Senate Bill 7, which quite frankly is a direct attack on the voting rights of black and brown, not just black and brown, but Texans everywhere. So today we have a wide array of speakers that's going to talk about some of the issues and some of the problems in these bills, and why we're fighting, and why we need everybody to join this fight. So without further ado, I'll leave it over to our MC this morning, Brother Robert Williams of Alliance for a New Justice System.
Thank you, Chaz Moore, and thank you all for coming this morning to our press conference to address the injustices of House Bill 6 and Senate Bill 7. We have a great number of speakers for you this morning that will be addressing these issues that are very important to us, very important to me. I was born in 1958 and my mother couldn't vote. Not until I was 7 years old. During that time, my daddy would take me up and down the street fighting for that right for my mother to vote. One election in particular, I remember he had me and my friends and all we had to do was go up and heads are bills that are about suppressing the votes of black and brown and poor Texans and Americans. That creates a dark day in Texas, a day when elected officials can concoct a narrative that is obviously false. You would think that members of their own party would be saying, don't embarrass us like that. The fact that the claim of massive voter fraud is the alternative truth that's being utilized as a predicate for determining the need for these oppressive and suppressive voter rights pieces of legislation. As stated, I'm Dr. James Dixon of the Houston NAACP, pastor of the Community of Faith Church and presiding president of Kingdom Builders Global Fellowship. As we speak, 43 states in our nation are dealing with voter suppression legislation. That means that there is a conspiracy, a corrupt conspiracy nationally to oppress voters. We've come today in Texas to say that we're joining the nationwide and the statewide coalition of people who believe in justice, equality, and equity, who are calling for those laws to be voted down. Our sacred right is worth the fight. 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 Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. had this to say about voting and voting rights. give us the ballot, was his speech in 1957, which says, give us the ballot and we will quietly and non-violently, without rancor or bitterness, implement the Supreme Court's decision of May 17, 1954. Voting is a non-violent power. Voting is a non-violent power. It's moral. It's just. So those who work to take away that right are doing the opposite. Their actions are immoral, unrighteous, and unjust. And we're here to say today to those who support unrighteous, immoral, unjust legislation, you will go down in history as those who sought to turn the clock back and bring Jim Crow back to Texas in 2021. And on behalf of these children who travel to Austin, Texas today, we're saying, don't embarrass yourself as those who would treat these children's future like they should not have the right to vote. Their great-grandparents suffered, bled, died, marched, and fought for the right to vote, so they would not have to have the same fight. And we're raising up a generation of freedom fighters, liberators, who understand that the call must be clear and the truth must be spoken to power. We're saying today in Texas, voters' rights up and voter suppression down. Empower those who empower us and disempower those who don't. How do you do that? At the ballot box. Vote people out who vote for voter suppression. We do that at the cash register. Don't buy where people disempower voting rights. We will call boycotts, we will strike, we will march until we get justice. And as said earlier, we know the victory is on our side because truth crushed to the ground will always rise again. And there's redemption in unearned suffering. We will have voting rights in Texas now and forever. Don't take the sacred right, because the sacred right for us is worth the fight. Thank you, Brother Robert.
Thank you so much, Bishop Dixon. The sacred right is definitely worth the fight for these young babies right here. My mother can vote today because we marched in the 60s. And as a result of that, we now have young ladies leading this battle, like Miss Diane LaFay of Black Voters Matters. You will hear from her now.
Hi, everyone. We know all too well the generational tactics of voter suppression that have plagued our communities for far too long. Black Voters Matter is committed to investing in the grassroots effort across the state of Texas that seeks to preserve the progress that was made by our forefathers. It is our responsibility to protect the rights that were purchased with the blood of our ancestors and to work in solidarity to ensure everyone has a seat at the table. We will not tolerate their attempt to silence our communities and will continue to make clear demands of our elected officials. There is no gray area when dealing with injustice, and those who hide behind the shadows will be forced to take a stand. We recognize this moment and will not let up until all of our communities have full representation and unlimited access to the electoral progress. We encourage you all to stay engaged with our calls to action, and we know that it's going to take all of us to win this fight. Nobody can do everything, but we all can do something.
She said that this right has been purchased by the precious blood of our ancestors. And who best to address that or segue into that than the namesake of one of the fathers of the movement, Dr. Frederick Douglass Haynes. Come on, Pastor.
Thank you very much. I think it was Chuck D who said these days we can't tell who's in cahoots because the KKK wears three-piece suits.
make the connection between January 6th, where we saw white supremacists literally determined to negate the vote of those who had expressed themselves in November. And they went to the United States Capitol in order to overturn the election, suppress the vote, if you please. And don't miss the connection between what they did January 6th and their ideological sisters and brothers in state capitals across this nation who are doing everything they can to ensure that only certain people vote. Those who are whiter, older, and wealthier, because they want to dress up apartheid, Jim and Jane Crow segregation in a tuxedo and with a bow tie. And we are simply saying the KKK and those who are engaged in these kinds of practices are basically the same. And we have come here to Austin to call them out. We have come here to Austin to make a moral appeal to those with a conscience, to recognize that what is happening right now is immoral, it's dead wrong, and it is anti-democracy. If democracy's essence is one person, one vote, then why is it that you have to engage in such suppressive tactics that already we live in a state that studies have shown is the most difficult state in the union to vote because of barriers that have been erected that preclude us from going to vote. And yet what happens? This past November, we go to the polls en masse, and their response is not to look for ways to ensure that we have same-day voter registration. It's not to look for online voting like other progressive states, but instead, this state says, no, we can't have that many black, brown, and poor people voting. We've got to suppress the vote. We understand this game. It's a racist game. We understand this game because guess what? We are the children of those civil rights warriors who stood for us, shed blood for us. And because they did that for us, we recognize that we're going to win this game. We're going to win this game because they paid for us to get in this game. We're going to win this game because truth is going to always win out. We're going to win this game because if democracy is right, voter suppression is wrong. We are going to win this game because Dr. King was right. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. Glory, hallelujah. His truth is marching on. Y'all didn't feel King. Well, maybe you feel Kendrick Lamar. We gonna win this game because all our life we had to fight. But since God's got us, we gonna be all right.
Woo! Thank you, Bishop. Thank you, Bishop. What did he say? They were whiter, older, and wealthier. I heard that. I'm bringing up somebody to you right now that is blacker, that is younger, but that is also wealthy in her spirit and her passion for fairness, justice, and equity, and that would be Miss Shakira Dennis of New Waves Cares. Come on, Shakira.
No, it's fine. I'm not going to get it. I promise. First, thank everyone for being here. I do want to acknowledge Bishop Dixon, Pastor Haynes, our faith leaders, for standing in solidarity, and also our young leadership, our civic leaders, our grassroots organizations who came together because, rightfully so, this is something that we should be standing together against. House Bill 6 and Senate Bill 7 is a direct violation of our constitutional right to vote. It goes without saying, right? We cannot continue to stand by while legislators who, by all means, should be identifying more creative avenues for us to vote easily and to participate in our civic process are now saying, let's overcomplicate this process. I hail from Harris County, Texas, home of drive-through voting, home of 24-hour voting, home of the very catalyst for this bill, right? We witnessed record voter turnout numbers, right? What's wrong with that? What's wrong with everyone taking up in arms and having their voices heard at the ballot box? There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And we cannot stand by and turn a blind eye or turn the other cheek while our rights are being trampled upon. It goes without saying. Earlier today at the press conference, we saw many generations come together. Young, our elders, our faith leaders, our grassroots organizations, advocacy groups saying this is a no, right? This legislation is wrong. And other legislators who come here, and we have a part-time legislator. There's so many other issues, healthcare, education, criminal justice reform, just to name a few, right, that we should be on the front lines combating, but yet we have to take time because people want to turn us back 30, 40, 50, 60 years because they can't stand young black and brown folks or African-American-led communities coming to the ballot box to have their voices heard. Again, we have to stand in solidarity against this piece of legislation. We have to slow the process. We have to hold those accountable. We know our calendars committee, right, our corporate community, others who are sitting by and have the power to speak up, to help the organizations and groups and individuals that are here today amplify our message and to ensure that this legislation is not passed on our watch because we're doing our part in our communities. And we can't drive to Austin every time someone says, you know what, we want to trample on your voting rights, right? This is the season. We can't do that. We shouldn't be dealing with these issues right now. So I want to thank, again, everyone who took the time out of their days, who took off work to drive all the way down here to Austin to say, please, let me vote. Let me participate in the process that is rightfully due to me by way of the Constitution. So thank you all.
Great job. Great job. Woo. That's why I love our young black women. I also love our young black men. I'm about to bring one up to you right now in the form of Minister Dominique Alexander, from the founder of the New Wave, Next Wave Generation out of Dallas. Come on, Dominique.
So I've always said I hate speaking behind my pastor. It seems I'm doing this more often. My name is Minister Dominique Alexander, president and founder of the Next Generation Action Network. And we are here again for another sad occasion. I echo the words of many people who have said we could be here focusing on many things other than this situation. Just like a good friend said, Chaz, there is billions of dollars in the state coffers that should be released to education system, while our education system is failing right now in the state of Texas. While we're trying to get funding to school districts in Houston and Dallas, San Antonio, and rural areas. But yet the number one agenda in the state of Texas is the right to vote. The number one agenda is for Governor Greg Abbott is to impede on our right to vote with no facts, no statistics to back their agenda. The only fact is that black and brown people are outnumbering them in the ballot box.
Come on.
And Governor Hot Wheel, as we call it, agenda is only to yet impede on our right to vote because he don't see himself winning in 2022. He don't want to see a Georgia happen in Texas. He don't want to see Houston, Harris County coming up with new ideas to make sure that everyone have the right to vote. Everyone has the access to vote. Things that will have Travis County and Dallas County and other municipalities that are blue counties do that same thing. This is the reason why we are here. We're not here because there's a real problem. We're here because they see the expiration date on their seat. So I would end just like I started the press conference. Like the late, great Fannie Lou Hamer said, if I am free, who is it to tell me how much freedom I should have? Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Alexander. We only have a couple more speakers. You know, I told you I couldn't vote when my mother was born. My mother couldn't vote when I was born. She also couldn't think of having a title back then as the lady that we are about to bring forward to you now. And that would be Miss Kamaya Factory, Executive Director, President of the Black Freedom Factory.
Thank you, everybody, for having me here today. My name is Kamaya Factory. I'm the President and Executive Director of Black Freedom Factory, an organization dedicated to data-driven activism, communal advocacy, and diversity and inclusion as it pertains to race relations in the city of San Antonio, Texas. I stand here today to urge you all to recognize that the youth are faced with something that our ancestors necessarily didn't have to see, and that is the habitual violence and execution of our people circulated on social media over and over again. Our youth, the future of voting, have to see George Floyd's breath leave him. They have to see Dante Wright shot at the expense of an air freshener. They have to see Ahmaud Arbery murdered for running in his neighborhood. This is circulated on their timelines over and over again. So I stand here today to remind you all that the youth, the future of the next vote, are watching history, are watching our people die countless times. Black Freedom Factory exists because the data is something, unfortunately, that the system and institutions listen to and validate, but the numbers don't lie. We have been suppressed. Our vote has been suppressed. It is time for the 14th Amendment of Equal Protections to extend to our communities and to extend to our people. Today we stand here because the baton has been passed to us by our ancestors. Our ancestors stand in solidarity with us today as we plead, but not plead. We fight. We fight for a right that was given to us. If you will not show us what democracy looks like, we will show you.
Come on.
Thank you.
We almost could have closed out right now, but we're going to close out with a good preacher, Bishop Sheldon Beatty. After you hear from Bishop Sheldon Beatty, Bishop Dixon out of Houston will close out the press conference. Thank you all for coming today.
Thank you for all the organizers and all the pastors and other leaders that are standing here. Thank you for your words and sharing the sentiments of so many people. And for those of you who are participating by this viewing mechanism, thank you for participating, those who are carrying the message. It's a wonderful thing. I've been in Texas now over 30-some years, and one of the first messages that I received when I came on the highway was, don't mess with Texas. It said, don't mess with Texas. And so I came to tell you the same message you've been telling me for over 30 years, don't mess with Texas. And to show you that we are Texas too. We may be of a particular organization or group of people, but we are Texas too. And so we're showing you, don't mess with Texas.
Thank you, Bishop Beatty. We have Jamar Brown of the Texas Coalition of Black Democrats. Thank you for being here today.
Absolutely.
Yes, indeed.
Good morning, everyone. So my name is Jamar Brown. I serve as president of the Black Austin Democrats, which is one of the many chapters of the Texas Coalition of Black Democrats. We are here locally in Austin, but also statewide, a coalition of organizations working together to increase African-American political participation. And what that looks like is registering people to vote. What that looks like is making sure that people show up to the ballot box, what they're fighting us right now. What that looks like is also making sure that we are represented in the seats of power, because it also means that if you're not at the table, as we know, you're on the menu. And so one of the things that is very important that we have to recognize and that we have to understand this morning is this is not about voter security. This is not about increasing the vote. This is about suppressing the vote. This is about intimidating voters. This is about furthering policy oppression. And what we have to recognize also is right now we are at the state capitol. This is the seat of state government, where decisions are made about our lives every single day. How we educate our children in the midst of a pandemic. How people access vaccines in the midst of a pandemic. How to make sure that we hold the police accountable when black people are shot by police, right? How black women receive health care across the state is all right here right here. And so what we have to recognize as part of this work is making sure that we are increasing our votes, but making sure that we are fighting bills like HB 6 and SB 7. What happened last year? Black people and brown people showed up in overwhelming numbers across Texas and all across the country. What happens when you lose a game? You change the rules. And these bills are clear signs of them changing the rules and changing the narrative around who showed up to the ballot box. It's not just about voting, it's about who showed up to vote and who they don't want to show up to vote. And so that's what we've got to recognize, that our lives really are on the line in terms of our access to the ballot box. They are working to change the rules right now, and we have shown up as a multi-generational coalition, as a coalition of people who believe in faith, people who believe in justice and believe in equity. We're showing up because this is not a play just about voting. This is a play about power and keeping people in power that don't deserve it. And democracy does not only belong to people who want to keep a seat. Democracy belongs to all of us. And we decide who sits in the seat. And our right to vote is our sign of a decision that we're able to make. I tell people all the time that our sign of voting is like if you're on a nonprofit board of directors, right? You analyze your executive director. You give them a performance review every single year. And then when we show up to vote, we decide if we like what you're doing or not.
That's right.
And you don't have a right to decide that I don't get to decide whether I like what you are doing or not. And so that's what we're here fighting for. And we're going to show up every step of this legislative process. We're showing up at the calendars committee to ask those members to make sure this does not move to the floor, as it does not need to go there. We'll show up if it happens to make it to the floor. We'll show up everywhere, right, in the meaning of this, and we'll show up. But what we have to also recognize about voter suppression is it's about depressing a community and keeping communities in trauma. And that's what we're experiencing right now, that people have to take off school and people have to take off work to be able to be here to fight something like this in order. We should be creating more jobs for people. We should be getting our kids in college. We should be getting our health care together and doing all of those different things. And so I'm honored to represent the Texas Coalition of Black Democrats today. I'm honored to stand in this diverse but multi-generational coalition because, as Robert talked about his mother, we're fighting the same old things. And our children are watching us. And courage cannot skip this generation, and it cannot skip the state and the leadership we are demanding in this state. So thank you all for having me, and we're fighting for every person to have a right to vote in this state. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamar. Another powerful sister, Coretta Brown with the Alliance for Justice, will come to speak at this time. Receive Coretta. President.
How y'all doing? My name is Coretta Brown, and I'm the president of the Alliance for a New Justice System. When we started the Alliance for a New Justice System, we began it for one reason and one reason only, and that was to establish a new form of justice in the state of Texas. One of the things that we need right now, I heard us all say a lot of beautiful things, a lot of powerful things, and so I just want to take this time to talk to our federal government, because we went to Georgia, we walked in Georgia, and we asked people to turn out and vote so that we can have a majority, so that Vice President Kamala Harris could be the one to be the tie-breaking vote. And we need to pass House Bill 1. Right. We need to eliminate the I'm sorry, y'all. We need to eliminate the suppression, but no, we need to eliminate the filibuster. And that's what I'm calling on us to do. If we can eliminate the filibuster, if we can have our federal government do what we need them to do to eliminate voter suppression, it will help a lot of states out, not just Texas, but across the United States. People have a right to vote. Our ancestors bled and died for us to have the right to vote.
Yes.
It doesn't make any sense. It's not any reason why we have to stand up here and beg you to give us the right to vote. So I want to let everybody that's going to be in the calendars committee understand that there will be accountability.
Come on.
Yes, it will be.
There will be accountability. Voter suppression cannot pass.
Yes.
It must not pass.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Coretta, for that perspective and insight. At this time, any questions from the media? Any questions? Let me say, as we prepare to close this press conference and this rally, when blacks were brought to these shores in chains on ships and identified as slaves, Dr. King says that's when they fingerfied blacks. It was never the intent that people who look like us would have power in a place like this. When the 1965 Voter Rights Act was passed, people responded with white backlash then. When Barack Obama was elected, more backlash. And when Donald Trump was not re-elected, more backlash. What we're watching is another form of backlash because people have been angry in this country ever since we won and secured the right to vote. And we're simply here to say today, the way to remain in power is earn our vote, not to destroy our right to vote. It's a cowardly act to create a narrative that's false, to determine legislation that's voter suppressive when you don't simply have the decency or the integrity or the willpower to figure out how to become what all people need. It's cheaper for you to try to take the vote as opposed to earn the vote. So the bottom line is we're standing for voter rights today, tomorrow, and forever. And until you respect us, you got to expect us. Until you respect us, you've got to expect us. Not on our watch. We'll fight for the sacred right. Thank you very much.
Does anybody need like one-on-ones or like Hey, Bishop. Dr. Haynes.
He's gone.
Dr. Haynes.